Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started today. My name is Hannah Norman. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist at United Way, and I have the pleasure of coordinating all things emerging leaders on behalf of United Way, and along with the EL Leadership Committee who planned this event today. Before we get started, I wanted to briefly talk about emerging leaders for those of you who are new with us today. At United Way, it is a big priority for us to build relationships with young professionals, so all of you. We know that we are the next generation of nonprofit leaders, community leaders, business leaders, and we want to educate you guys on the great work that United Way does in the areas of education, stability, and health and well-being, so that you feel led to support that work both today and many, many years in the future. And that is what Emerging Leaders is all about. We educate you guys and we provide ways for you to also grow as a professional, which is what this event is today. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We thought this was a great topic just as we're still navigating all things COVID-19, and we really wanted to talk about some things that leaders have had to pivot to do navigating all of this. And so we wanted to bring together a nonprofit leader, a corporate leader, and a small business leader. So our facilitator today is Ashley Lawrence. She is an affiliate broker at Berkshire Hathaway, real estate agent. And she was previously the director of programs at the CoLab. And she's currently the vice president of impact for our emerging leaders group. Our first panelist is Lesley Scearce. Lesley has spent her entire professional career in nonprofit leadership. She was the first executive director of On Point Direction for Life and later moved on as their CEO and president. And she's currently serving as United Way's CEO and president. Our next panelist is Michael Rice. He spent how many years? About 8 years as a consultant in India before coming to Chattanooga in 2015, a coffee consultant. He traveled around to 11 cities in Mexico doing field work so that he could create the best bar and coffee shop. And it's the one that we know and love today, the Mad Priest. So Michael, thank you for being here today. Our next panelist is Michelle Boucher. She has 30 plus years in corporate experience. She joined Unum in 1990 and has worked her way up to being their senior vice president of benefits. And she oversees roughly 4,000 of Unum's employees. So we are very excited to have all of you here today. And thank you for giving us part of your day and your time. And Ashley, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Hannah, and thank you all so much for spending your lunch here with us today. Hopefully we'll have an awesome conversation and have quite a bit of education out of it. As Hannah said, my name is Ashley Lawrence, and I am an affiliate broker with Berkshire Hathaway. I also have the pleasure of serving on the executive committee for United Way's Emerging Leaders as our vice president of impact. So thanks again so much for joining us, and let's get started. So, and again, this is my first time leading a webinar so let's see how it all goes, right? And my dog is here, so fingers crossed that everything goes well with him. So, all right. So to kick off our discussion, I'm just gonna have a big, broad question for Michelle, Michael, and Lesley, and thank you all so much for being here with us today. So first off, let's just start with how long you guys have been in a leadership role. And here's a very big and broad question. What's your most important lesson that you've learned to date in your current leadership role? I'll send it over to you guys, whoever wants to start us off.
I can kick us off if you'd like.
Thanks so much, Michelle. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with all of you today. So I'm excited about it. So let's see, gosh, as you mentioned, I've been with Unum for 30 years. So probably I'd say 20 of that has been in some level of a leadership position, which has been fantastic. And gosh, so many lessons learned over that period of time. But a couple things I would share with you probably are ones that I've carried the entire time that I've been in my leadership positions. So first is kind of empathy, right? So thinking, and that's both for kind of our claimants, our customers, and also as I talk with, all of our employees, really understanding kind of where they're at in their particular situation and doing my best to help, support them and getting through, whatever it is that they're tackling. So really being a good listener and really trying not to approach it as a one size fits all, but really trying to understand exactly what their particular situation is and working with them to help them navigate to get to, a better place and, a positive path forward. I'd say probably the second thing is just being vulnerable. I've found that the more I can share about myself, my story, I just get so much back in return. And I'll tell you, it took me many, many years into my leadership role to really understand and appreciate that. I didn't often share a whole lot about, myself or what was going on, but I found, as I mentioned, as I matured and got a lot of feedback over the years, that really, again, sharing what was going on with me personally, sharing a bit about, what I do outside of work, really, I think helped folks, to get to know me a little bit better, but also allowed them to feel safe in sharing a little bit more about themselves and their story. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Michael, Lesley, do you guys have anything for us?
Sure, I'll hop in. Yeah, so I guess just to make sure, I don't know if my bio was written poorly, but as Hannah mentioned, kind of been in leadership positions since about 2010, 2011. Only about 3 or 4 of those years was in India. We were consulting for coffee shops, and then we moved here in 2015, which pretty much has been in leadership positions the whole time, obviously since Mad Priest started. I feel like every season that we've been in a position of leadership has shown us lots of different things. I say us a lot. I speak in that person because my wife and I are kind of like one. But I feel like particularly what's more relevant to the last 4 years as we started Mad Priest in Chattanooga is just trying to understand what a leader is in comparison to a manager, like how I've tried to manage people, but I'm really not a manager, I'm a leader. And what does that role look like in comparison to other leadership roles, but defining the different abilities and I guess talents that each person has and how to like really fill those gifts well. And I think along with all that is just that the level of communication, being able to communicate with other management, other staff, all your staff, all the way down, and just ensuring that everyone's on the same page. And I think a lot of that also comes down to making sure you have the right team, right personalities, and really utilizing some of those opportunities that are out there, such as not just personality tests, but even like leadership development, team building things to make sure that we all communicate different. We all react and act different, and not ever allowing that to be the forefront of like people getting frustrated, but instead like how do you maximize that we celebrate our differences, but we learn how to communicate with where we're all at in our lives and stuff. So I think communication and kind of really maximizing how to build the team around that has been a really key part of development for the last few years. So.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. Good to see you also. Lesley, how about you?
Yeah. First of all, thanks y'all. It's great to be with you. And I've been in a leadership position now for over 20 years. I became the executive director of On Point when I was 21 years old. So like right out of college. So my first piece of advice to y'all is to not let your youth intimidate you or stand in your way. Instead, embrace it with a lot of humility and willingness to learn, because this community, people in this community taught me so much in those days and really mentored and guided, and I soaked all that up. And as to Michelle's point, I made a ton of mistakes and learned from all of them. So I would say that through each season of leadership, there really are distinct lessons and to take time to lift out and think about those and write them down and see how you build on those in each season of your leadership. But the one thing that stays common, I think for me across all 21, 22 years of leadership is the idea that progress moves at the speed of trust. Our United Way people have heard me say that a million times. Progress moves at the speed of trust. And I think that that's true externally for our working community, but it's also true internally with our own teams. And we took the time to identify, like, how do you define trust? What is that? And so the lesson that we've learned is really figuring out that for us, trust, we use something called the trust equation. This is such a great little nugget to take with you, that trust equals C plus R plus V over SI. What that means is trust equals credibility plus reliability plus vulnerability over self-interest. And so if we're looking to make progress as a team, I think what I've really learned is if we ever have a breach in trust, it usually comes down to one of those things. Like we're missing some credibility or not being reliable, or maybe we have our walls up, we're not being vulnerable, or we're letting our own agenda overtake the team's. You know, those are the things that we can point to and identify. And at the end of the day, if we can be really transparent about that with each other and with those that we serve, it'll help us make progress a lot faster.
Thank you. That was really awesome. I was writing as quickly as I possibly could. I think I got it correct for everyone that didn't get it. It was C plus R plus V, credibility plus reliability plus vulnerability over self-interest, which I think is such an awesome takeaway. Thank you. And kind of in that same vein, well, quickly though, if you guys have any questions for any of the panelists, you can just drop them below in the chat. Hannah has a working document, and at the end of our discussion, we're going to take as many of those questions as possible. So just be sure to pop those in there. But kind of in that same vein, you know, what was it like as a leader, kind of relying on empathy and vulnerability, and to pivot essentially overnight in response to COVID-19? Whoever wants to kick us off there, kind of referring to systems that were in place, challenges, hurdles, whoever wants to start us off.
I guess I'll go. Keep this thing moving. So I guess from a small business perspective, the thing that probably was the most hurtful, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of the small businesses in town and across the country, is just the reality of capital, not having the resources necessary to transition. You know, I'm excited to hear what Michelle has to say, because like, I think that difference of like, okay, we're going to work from home and we're going to give everyone these computers. And I know I have friends that work for Blue Cross and same thing, and how they reacted. It might have taken a little time or whatever, and obviously it was expensive. But for us, we literally just got frozen in our tracks because no real reserve capital, loss of 90% of sales. So honestly, like we didn't have systems in place because we're a small business that's just operating quarter to quarter, trying to figure out, okay, why is that margin so thin there? Okay, let's improve that, in hopes that you do grow some sort of, you know, reserve for a rainy day and things like that. But obviously to this kind of extreme, it's been nothing but just trying to survive, which has really been the biggest hurdle at the same time. So.
I know, thanks, Michael. I know you of all of kind of the small business leaders, you really did take a big leadership role within food and beverage, created a lot of really cool programs for folks to try to participate. So I thought that was awesome that you not only stood up as a leader for your staff, but also kind of for the food and beverage community at large. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I'll hop in. So to Michael's point, yeah. So we kind of on the opposite right end of I guess the spectrum in terms of we have lots of people, you know, lots of resources, things like that. What we had to learn and do differently was mobilizing those resources, those people very, very quickly, so that we could get folks, our people, settled in at home. With their new normal, if you will, you know, in their home, and everyone had something different going on, whether it was childcare, elder care, lots of roommates, just a lot of different situations. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting our people settled as quickly as possible so that we can then turn our attention to take care of all of our customers who were dealing with the same situations. Some, right, small businesses all the way up through, kind of our larger clients. And so we were fortunate that we were able to quickly get the majority of our workforce home. We started with those that were customer facing, so that we're on the phone with our claimants, our employers, et cetera, moving them home, getting them set up first with, hey, just let's get, a headset. Let's get you at least your laptop so you have one screen, so we could get you as productive as quickly as possible. And then, get you a second monitor, a stipend, different things to help you, move from, literally one day being in the office with everything to the next day being in your home, or someplace, that, you could, again, try to get settled as quickly as possible. So it required us to just be a lot more nimble, and not use our typical hierarchy in terms of how we make decisions, to move. So we had to really just move very quickly and not worry about checking with every single person to move people. It was, nope, you have the authority, you go, you do what's best, right, for your people, for our customers, and go, as quickly as possible. And then in another week to 10 days, we'll then stop, we'll assess, and we'll make any adjustments that we needed to make. So I tell you, we learned a lot about things that we do pretty well, and then we learned a lot about things where we have some pretty big gaps that we are now addressing, so that we can just make sure that on a go-forward basis, we're not only better prepared, God forbid we ever encounter anything like this again, but more importantly, how to make sure that we're supporting our, our employees and our customers.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch y'all, Michelle, how fast a company your size could move. And I'll echo that. I mean, I think that a couple of things that I would affirm is, I mean, thankfully for United Way, we had systems in place around, collaboration and how we mobilize people to act and how we use data to make really informed on the ground decisions. So in those ways, like we were, United Way is made for a crisis. That's why we're here. You hope you don't ever have to lead in it, but that's hopefully where we are able to give help and be the place to give help and get help the best. But I'll tell you, no one's ever seen anything like COVID-19. This is not like, a tornado or, other crises that we have helped be on the front lines of. So for us, I think the biggest challenge externally was, we acted fast, just like you said, Michelle. I mean, the minute that we realized that COVID was going to be a thing, we pulled everyone we could together on the first floor downstairs at United Way and just started mapping out, like, where are the gaps? Where are we going to see trouble? Who's going to need help the fastest for things like food and education? And honestly, y'all, I came in this morning and all those Post-its are still up down there. It's like Pompeii, like frozen in time, from the day that we left the office. And, but we acted really fast, and we found that the community also is so nimble and willing to act fast. And so the challenge we had, though, was that the typical systems and the institutions that we rely on in a crisis did not exist in a COVID world. So where we typically could, set up an emergency management, place, that's not going to happen in COVID because we can't gather. The traditional ways of relying on help we realized was just out the window. And so for us, it became really important that we worked with partners to identify problems really quickly, to identify really fast, innovative solutions that we've never thought of before. And, one of those outcomes was, because we couldn't have a physical emergency response hub, we created a digital emergency response hub with the community, and that turned out to be really effective. But we had to stretch, because we certainly, your typical disaster response did not apply. I'd say internally it was the same. I mean, I take no credit for this. Stephen Van Gorp and other folks on our team created cross-departmental teams to help be the filters of information and action. So we had really clear roles on who was on point for what, and then systems to check in, actually in the beginning, like 3 times a day, and then moving to daily and now twice a week. And so that helped keep us all moving on the same page. But we had to lay it out really clearly and really plainly, or we would have been in a virtual world stepping on each other's toes and not making progress.
Sure. Thank you so much. And echoing you, you know, our entire community, this is for you, Michelle, our entire community really saw how Unum was so quick to just get the entire workforce transitioning to working from home and, you know, amid all of these crazy health concerns. And you kind of touched on sort of flattening the hierarchy and how you were able to get things done more quickly, kind of the mobilization of resources. Now that you've kind of crossed that hurdle, do you see this as a larger part of your business kind of going forward?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So what we did similar to what Lesley was describing in terms of that team. So we had what we called an operational readiness team that represented each of the major functions of the company. And so that team was really accountable for, again, making decisions, making sure everybody was kept up to date. So whether it was the Sunday night huddles, the daily huddle, like, so very similar. It sounds like the way we approach things. And so what we did is we had that team, we spent some time with that team to do a retrospective to say, okay, step us through as a leadership team, like what happened? How did that feel? And what things, let's say 5 to 7 elements do we want to make sure we take forward as a company, right? So we don't want to just apply them in a crisis. We want to, right, it's, you know, great that you're able to respond pretty quickly in a crisis, but you don't want to operate in crisis mode, right? That's just not sustainable. It's not healthy for an organization, but there are elements that you want to make sure that you can start to embed on a go forward basis. So we learned a lot about mobilizing the entire workforce home. So we had pockets where remote working was absolutely part of our organization. So part of my group is our contact center. We have probably half of our contact center that works remotely, which is an advantage for us because we can cover multiple shifts and things like that. There are other parts of the company where we felt like probably doesn't lend itself. Well, guess what? You didn't have a choice. So we've learned a lot in terms of how you virtually hire, onboard, train, manage, engage. So we built muscles as an organization around just engaging differently, you know, with our employees. So you mentioned, you know, perhaps your dog might pop into a video. Like, it's a good day when dogs, kids, right, they just randomly pop into videos. You know, you can hear babies in the background. It's just really, you know, embracing that, right? As opposed to feeling like, oh, that's a disruption, and having some fun with it, right? Whether it's a pet contest or, you know, bingo or just different things like that. So I think we learned a lot about how to engage, really be intentional about engaging, you know, with our employees, because you can't run into them anymore in the hallway. You know, you can't, you know, have that quick conversation face to face. So I think those are things we absolutely are now thinking about. How do we embed those and they become part of our way of working, part of our culture on a go forward basis?
Great, thank you so much. Kind of along that same vein, for you, Michael, you know, and you did touch on this earlier, you know, remote working wasn't an option for you guys, right? I mean, you were a service-based business and client-facing every single day. And I know that the struggles that you faced as a small business were absolutely incredible. Can you talk to us about how any of these challenges may have, and they may not have, may have positively affected or sort of refocused your brand?
Yeah. Honestly, that was a hard one for me to think about because it's hard to be positive in general right now. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, it's done a few things. It's allowed us to kind of focus on the overall branding, like who we are as a company and what we want to put our attention towards. So a small thing, for example, that we've kind of discovered is that our Cherry Street location, we really want to just focus on the bar. And we see a lot of brand confusion between Mad Priest Coffee and then the Mad Priest downtown. And so we're kind of moving in a direction where we're rebranding the downtown space as a bar specifically. But really, I think the other thing is that it's kind of brought us back to the essentials. Like there were a lot of projects that were in the pipeline when COVID hit that I think were potentially good, but they were risky. And risks are good, and growing a business is good. But again, we're a 4-year-old company that in a small town that I think like COVID maybe prevented us from getting too deep into them and allowed us to really focus back on kind of that classic like business 101, like focus on your one thing and do it well, which for Mad Priest Coffee Roasters is coffee. And that kind of led to the downtown location being like, okay, cocktails. Like we really want to focus on the bar. And then the final thing that I kind of think about from a positive perspective is just kind of like figuring out how, like we've already been really involved in the community and kind of trying to market well to the people that are followers and patrons, but how to refine that in a more intentional way. I know when COVID first hit, I specifically did a lot of daily video updates. And, you know, they weren't always happy updates by any means, but I heard a lot of people be like, man, keep doing those. We appreciate that. We want to be in touch. And so obviously it takes a little more, well, it kind of goes back to what Lesley was talking about with trust, right? Like vulnerability, the credibility, these things are sometimes hard to accomplish through social media. And I think if we can use these platforms for bettering our relationships with our guests through those kind of vulnerable moments of here's what's going on, guys, and really touching base instead of just throwing up a really nice someone's easy little phrase or whatever. So I feel like there's a lot of positive things on those spectrums that have allowed us to kind of, we're going to come out on the other end going, cool, this is who we are and this is what we're doing, which hopefully will, one, have a better profit margin, but also kind of redefine to Chattanooga and all of our guests, this is who we are and this is what we do. We create this at this quality and we're here, you know, so.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that you've done a really, really good job just historically of showing that vulnerability, and also just sort of the brand association with Michael Rice and the Mad Priest, right? That they go hand in hand. And there's often sort of this like, you don't know who owns a restaurant or operates a restaurant or bar. You don't know who your coffee roaster is. And I think that something that really has set you apart is that we've all been super clear about who the leader is, you know. And you touched on one thing about, or you touched on focusing on one thing, like getting back to basics. And that leads me into a question for you, Lesley. You know, United Way is always at the forefront of addressing community needs, whether it's COVID-19 or tornadoes. Talk us through kind of what United Way's role is in a situation like this when it comes to serving the community.
There we go. Sure. Thank you. You know, I think put as simply as possible, I would say that our role through this process was to be a trusted place to give help and get help. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but honestly, you know, what we learned through this is that people want to help. We have an incredibly generous community, but they don't always know what to do. They don't always know who to trust. They don't always know where the best outlets are. And so we really wanted to be a convener of the work that was happening and frankly, solve some problems together. So we did a couple of things, and it happened kind of naturally and kind of organically. You know, the day I mentioned of the Post-its on the wall, we just pulled together a handful of institutions and grassroots community volunteers that first day and said, hey, what should we expect? And how do we even begin to work to solve these problems we've never had before? Like if you don't have a school system, for example, active to help you solve problems, everything changes. And so out of this, you know, 8 organizations coming together, by the very next day, we had over 100 organizations in the community on a daily task force call. And this natural problem-solving opportunity came together. And I see Ada's on this call. So Ada and the Venture Forward team and others really helped to facilitate that. And the point very much was very simple. What are the problems? What are the gaps? And what are some solutions? And it allowed us across sectors to really dig deep and solve some problems. The next big thing I think for us though was, ramping up services like 211, where if people need to know not just where to give help, but they need to know where to get help. And so, whether we were calling elderly neighbors at home to check on them, as a community and let them know they can call 211 for help. Or volunteers door knocking to see if people had food. That ability to convene at scale, I think is really critical. And then I think one of the coolest things we got to do was set up this Restore Hope Fund. We knew that people would be losing income because of COVID, and that, even if our incredible partners, delayed rent payment or utility payments, those were going to come due. And 40% of our neighbors were already struggling even before COVID. So the community stepped up in generous ways, and we partnered with 12 rockstar on the ground organizations and literally gave cash assistance to pay bills for rent, utilities, car payments for people who lost work during this time. So it's been a privilege to figure out how to coordinate and align and be like one receptacle of information on places to give help and get help.
Thank you. On that same vein, so I know that you have been super impactful within the community to make sure that resources are available. And this question is going to be for everyone, but we'll start with you, Lesley. What have you done to make sure that your staff has been taken care of during this time?
Yeah, that is such a good question. We put a stake in the ground, and in the planning that we're rolling out with our board and our staff this week, they'll see it again, that people first is what matters to us at United Way. And we can't serve people in the community well if our people aren't served well. So we've done that a couple of ways. I mean, honestly, some of it's been just as simple that we prioritize that at every leadership team meeting. We start out with, how are our people and what are we doing to make sure they're okay? And I don't just mean like blanket, hey Hannah, how are you? Kind of statements, but intentional questions. How are you today? How can we meet your needs? How are you feeling? 0 to 10, and trying to remove barriers. I think that one of the biggest things though that we can do and we've been able to do is to be as transparent as possible and over communicate. Like if we're not seeing each other face to face, that's hard. We know what sustained stress does to our, psyche and to our decision making. And so we've tried to be really transparent, be really open, communicate over and over again, so that folks are included and they know what we know when we know it. And when we don't know, we say so, but that we're going to figure it out together. We also put together a task force on reopening that includes a really broad cross section of the organization to help make those decisions, and I think that's helpful. And then finally, we had to make some really tough choices on priorities, but we also put a stake in the ground that we would keep our salaries and we would keep our benefits, and that we would do these things so that our team knew that we're doing everything we can to keep investing in their future.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, so just building on what Lesley was describing, so very similar. So our employees, so the safety and well-being of our employees, that was kind of the number one. So everything that we communicated, led with, thought about, really put our employees at the center. Lesley said it so well. If our employees weren't taken care of, then we couldn't possibly take care of our customers. So very similar approach from that perspective. So again, making sure we were engaging. We're fortunate enough to have, video capabilities. And so while we didn't, say it was mandatory, thou must be on video, we did encourage folks, to get on video. And of course, made a joke about it. Some people are like, oh, I haven't showered yet this morning, or whatever the case may be. So, that's okay. So just trying to, have as much of that kind of connection as you possibly can, you know, over video. Some of the other things we did as well is we introduced some new resources to help. So things like, so I'd mentioned the stipend to help people make that transition from work to home, different support groups, virtual babysitting. So just other resources that we, you know, could help. We listened to our, you know, our employee population to say, what things do you need help with? And that's what virtual babysitting came up from, kind of a grassroots effort, you know, to help, you know, to help some of our folks. We had a few people, any chance that we can get it for our 16-year-olds or our 18-year-olds that are at home as well. So, you know, we had some good fun with it as well. And then, you know, certainly just continually to express our gratitude just for everything that they are doing, and, you know, and what they've been, you know, been through. And we mentioned certainly talking about COVID as, you know, as the focus, but, you know, as all of you know, then we had the tornadoes hit us in Chattanooga as well. So like we needed that on top of, right, you know, COVID. So just, it was that, you know, pile-on effect for employees that some who've, you know, lost their homes, or the homes were damaged and had to move to different spots. And so just so much, you know, going on in the community that, you know, everybody was dealing with.
So I have to say, I'm actually pregnant right now. So I'm really interested. What is virtual babysitting, and how can I join in on it, even though I don't work for you?
Yes, yeah, I can send you some information. So yeah, it's a service you can sign up for, and they actually have qualified folks on the other end that will, you know, work with and help share in that, I guess, virtual learning and a little bit of babysitting. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Michael, I'm going to open this question up to you as well, but also kind of the follow-up to it. So, you know, I know that it's been difficult to take care of staff within not only small business, but specifically, you know, food and beverage. What have you done to keep both your staff and your patrons inspired, taken care of, healthy, excited during these past couple of months?
Yeah, honestly, this is a depressing question for me, because I feel like the reality is, again, due to small business, lack of resources and all of those things, it's just like our changes in staffing the last 2 months have been insane. We were actually at a point where we were pretty much starting from scratch right before COVID hit. So it was kind of like, it was interesting timing. And then obviously because of the unemployment stipend, then some people didn't want to necessarily come back to work. So on one hand, it's been just a constant struggle. It's like, no matter what you really offer people, because what we offer is so limited compared to a larger corporation potentially, it's harder to keep them motivated. I think that the two things that I think for people who still work for me, and, you know, we've really unfortunately had to lay people off and kind of fine tune things, but the people who are still with me, I think what drives them specifically is really two things. One is the communication. I kind of mentioned earlier, and Lesley touched on it too. They knew every update I got, they got. So it wasn't like this, like, oh, like, are we getting PPP? We don't know. Like, it was always, hey, we're applying for this. Hey, as soon as we get an update, hey, oh, hey, I applied for SBA. Oh, it got the eligibility for the disaster loan. Hey, oh, it actually dropped in our bank account. So versus like, had I just waited, obviously that causes even more fear of like, are we going to have a job? We don't even know, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that level of communication has been really important. And the other thing that I feel like has proven to give people, particularly again, back to the business side and staff, give them motivation, is just that level of ownership. Like, hey, like, we're in a season where I need everyone on staff to take ownership of their position. Like, you know, you're going to be doing things you don't want to do. You're probably underpaid, you know, but do you want to be a part of not only the growth of a small business, but get through this together? And I think everyone that works for me knows that there's assets on the other side of that. And, you know, we're still exploring things like cooperatives and pursuing B Corp status next and things like that. But kind of giving that ownership and saying, you run this, like, oh, you have an idea, or you want to improve this system or this thing, great, do it, you know, and just really letting kind of people take control of whatever it is they're overseeing. So it's been an ongoing like interesting thing to figure out, you know, but we have a great staff right now, and we're excited to see that slowly grow as we overcome this thing. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I don't think that you can see this in the chat right now, Michael, but there are quite a few people that are just saying how much they appreciate your honesty and your transparency about this.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
yeah, I'm not looking at the chat.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, during this time, I mean, you know, having the voice of large corporation, large nonprofit, so important in all the things that you know, both United Way and Unum have done to protect their employees and protect our community. But the reality is that so many small businesses have been so deeply impacted, and you know, props to you for doing everything that you can to hold on to your people and hold on to your business in general.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, of course. So on that same kind of line, the fear of the unknown, you touched on this, you know, through over communication with your team, Michael, you've been able to keep people around. And so for Lesley and for Michelle as well, you know, how have you kept your staff focused when there's so much fear, and staying sort of forward focused? Lesley?
Yeah, you know, this, it's really difficult. It's hard. And I think, I mean, I think we've just scratched the surface of a lot of the difficulties that we're going to see in the days to come. And so a few of the things that we did, and they might have seemed counterintuitive, but I think it actually helped us, was number one, we've invested a tremendous amount of time right now in planning. And when we had our first like 3-day virtual senior leadership team retreat, people were like, are you kidding? Like, we're in the middle of a crisis. How do we stop and take this time together to do this future planning work? But that's exactly why we needed to. We needed to figure out how to live with a foot in the crisis of today, look back at like lessons learned through the recession of 2008 and the things that we've seen in the past that we know to be true. And then based on these new realities, you know, chart a new future. And so it helped us, I think, alleviate fear, because we've done this planning now across the organization. In fact, this morning, right before this, the community impact team was doing this work. And so it alleviates fear, I think, when we can think of the future, look at trends, and be really honest and name the things that we're afraid of. For example, we are projecting a 20% loss in accounts receivable this year because our donations come from payroll deduction. You know, that's seismic. But if we can name that, then we can help plan for it. And if we can name that, we can chart the pivots we need to make to help work around it, right? And to get more innovative about things. So we've just been, we've doubled down on planning. I think it's just one way that we've tried to do that.
Yeah, just to build on their comments, just you know, a couple things that have been said. So just, you know, I'd say connecting and being flexible. So Michael said it well, right? It's just being very open and very transparent. So on a weekly basis, our CEO, Rick McKinney, along with our head of people and communications and our chief operating officer, do quick connects, 15 minutes, and they have multiples during the week so that we can do, you know, different parts of our employee base, and they're recorded, so they tune in, and they're very topical. So when we first started, it was all about, okay, let's talk about what's happening with our employees. Let's talk about what's happening with our customers. Here are some of the resources that we're rolling out. Let's hear from you, you know, if they're working, if they're not working. All the way to a couple of weeks ago, it was, okay, now we're going to talk about Project Reunite, which is, okay, how do we start to bring our employees on a voluntary basis back into our building? So if you want to come back to work on a volunteer, but you're going to volunteer, you know, this is, you know, how we're going to do it. Here are the precautions we're taking. Here's how we've retrofitted the buildings. So that's a really nice way for our CEO to connect, you know, with folks across the organization. And then we also have coffee talks. Again, they're topical, and it's two people having coffee over video, and you know, they're talking about, again, sometimes it's program. Sometimes it's what's going on in their personal life. Oftentimes that's when we see kids and pets join in, on the conversation as well, which is really nice. And then the other thing we're starting to do is very similar to what Lesley was describing, is planning. So we're starting to do some scenario planning. So, okay, we're now in 2025 and we're living with 4 different scenarios, right? So we're past it, we're still in it, and we're having to live with it, and a couple of other scenarios in between. Okay, what are some of the things that those scenarios would tell us we need to do now, even if if those realities don't actually come true? But there's probably some things we could do as an organization, to again get better in the place we're in, but also help us, plan for the future. So interesting to hear, even though we're in very different segments, a lot of the things that in common, that we're trying to do, to kind of get through this. So, thanks.
I absolutely agree. And on that same note, talking about kind of the new normal, figuring out what the new normal looks like for Unum. Michael, what does the new normal look like in the service industry, and where do you see it going?
I feel like it's still really hard to tell for us personally. We're a little unique because we're more beverage focused. That being said, our downtown location, the new normal is barriers between booths, masks, constant sanitizing, constant hand washing, being really intentional with things that honestly should be done anyway half the time other than the masks, as far as just cleanliness. But so that's the new normal, but part of the new normal also is getting creative in how we maximize gross revenue with less hours. So instead of, we used to be open Monday through Saturday, 17 hours a day, we're now open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 4 to midnight. And I have such an awesome team right now. They're projecting a similar gross revenue as last year, which is kind of mind-boggling because it'll also cost a fraction of the amount. And I think a lot of that just has to do with actually having the capacity and mental energy to like focus on something. So back to that essential focus that I personally as a leader haven't been able to do for a long time, which then also trickles down and impacts the rest of my staff. The other new normal that I think is pretty obvious for most people is just carry out and delivery. For us, we're moving more towards a complete.
Hey, buddy.
Oh, hey, buddy. We're moving to a complete kind of pop-up model where every location we have is very small. And whether it's drive-through or something like our original Broad Street location, we're moving away from, the traditional coffee house style of let's have seats, let's have this, and just really moving more towards come in, grab and go, things like that, which, is less inclined to build community, which obviously we love doing, but seems pretty necessary at the moment with everything going on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for continuing to serve our community and keeping us all fueled up. We all really appreciate it. Someone in the chat earlier was saying that they were currently drinking Mad Priest coffee.
Nice.
Speaking of that, if you guys have any questions, be sure to throw them in the chat. We're nearing the end of our discussion, so we want to make sure that all of your voices are heard too. Kind of finishing on a more positive note, and there are a couple more questions to get in, but Lesley, through all of these times that have been so tough for our entire community, can you talk to us about what you've seen Chattanooga do to be so generous just during this extreme time?
Yeah, we could have a whole second session just talking about generosity and creativity. I think what's blown my mind is the innovation we've seen through crisis, which honestly is when the best innovation arises, is when you have a really urgent problem to solve and you figure it out. So we've seen amazing things happen from, a Thursday afternoon where the school system says, we got to figure out how to feed 44,000 kids by Monday. And seeing the generosity of partners like the YMCA, and Boys and Girls Club, and food banks, and We Over Me Chattanooga, and all of these incredible groups come together to be like, we're going to put aside what we're doing and figure that out. And yes, they did. We have seen incredible generosity from the service industry. You know, Michael, it was amazing to me. Chattanooga Whiskey, you know, took their business model and through their distillery efforts made hand sanitizer, which is something that people needed, and then sold it, and then gave the proceeds of it to the Restore Hope Fund to help service industry workers who were out of work because of COVID-19. So it's been really cool to see people capitalize on their own value add and what they do really, really well to also help community, you know, at the very same time. It's been unbelievable. I mean, we've seen seniors, you know, door knocking other seniors and then letting us know where the meals go, and Carta stepping in to deliver meals to people's homes when elderly folks were aging in place and could not get out. The stories just go on. And I think it's really telling that, you know, through this season of increased financial constraints, to date, we've raised $500,000 in this Restore Hope Fund. And every single penny of that is going straight to individuals and families. That's amazing. And then another $500,000 raised with the Community Foundation and United Way for the tornado relief. So people stretch, you know, they are more creative, they're more innovative. And the generosity of giving at a time where things are really hard for people has been awesome. I think one of my favorite things I've seen was a local company knowing that things were tough for people right now. They're a really great company. They make something called Little Debbie's. And they had given a small stipend to everybody. And there were folks on that team that turned around and said, I want to donate that to somebody else who needs it more than me, because I still get to go to work every day. So it's endless. It's endless. And that's honestly what I think, back to your last question about what alleviates fear, it's seeing the good that we've got to keep the momentum growing on, and the kind of partnerships that never existed before. We have to continue to invest in those in the days to come.
Thank you so much. As a native Chattanoogan and somebody that loves Chattanooga, I'm always so proud of the work that we're able to do when we all kind of come together and have a public-private partnership, and it's just a beautiful thing. Speaking of that kind of good momentum, and on a personal note, what have you guys personally done from a self-care perspective to not keep from going crazy during this time of quarantine and you know, juggling the weight of leading an organization while juggling the weight of staying at home and with kids and family and the whole deal? Whoever wants to start us out, Michelle?
Sure, yeah. I will tell you, I failed miserably in this area. So I'm not a great role model, you know, to my team, right? It's working at home. So it's too easy, right? Because your home is your work and your work is your home now. And so, you know, for a period of time, other than to go pick up a few groceries, and then I even started having, you know, some of those, I didn't go anywhere. So I'm not the best one to answer this question, because I don't have, I'm not great at it. However, I have a phenomenal team and a great family that would remind me, like, okay, it's time for you, right, to, you know, go for a walk. Or it was probably a polite way of saying, you're driving us nuts. It's time for you to take a walk. It's time for you to, you know, kind of get away from the computer. So I needed to actually model much better behavior, including taking a day off, because I was telling my folks it was time for them to take some time off, and they're looking at me like, seriously, you know, you haven't taken any time off, type of thing. So I'd say I'm a work in progress from that perspective, and luckily I have a, you know, great set of you know, family, my team, etc., that is very supportive through this. So again, I'm not a great role model in this area, but I'm working hard at it.
Same here. What about you, Michael?
A healthy amount of CBD. I don't know. I mean, if we're being honest, the level of stress and issues of the last few months have not created an environment for me to be healthy. I'd say the only thing that comes to mind personally, because I know I need to eat healthier, I know I need to exercise. I listen to Tim Ferriss and get mad at myself because I think, gosh damn, he like freaking does all this stuff and how does he accomplish it? But we recently bought a home in January, which could have been a bad thing, but so far it's okay. We're still paying our mortgage, but having that space that was like our own, that we have like, space on the patio and just a place that I could actually come home to, even if I'm not able to accomplish exercise and eating healthy like I want. That's been a safe haven for sure. But yeah, I'm with Michelle. I'm not a good role model. It's something that I want to work with. And I think as we build our team back and we start to rehire again, having people that are all on that same path of growth together, not necessarily doing the same things, but just like, hey, we're all trying to become better people. So what are your goals? What are my goals? And we just haven't really had that, we haven't had that core team of leaders all together in the company, kind of holding each other accountable. So I think if we can establish that, that will be huge for me. It'll be huge for hopefully them as well, huge for the company. One of the things we actually talked about recently was with some of our newer night staff, we talked about getting a gym membership to the new Synergy climbing gym over in Southside, because we're good friends with the owners. And it's like, we want to support them, but hey, maybe if we all do this together, we'll actually execute it, whereas I wouldn't probably go otherwise. But so, yeah.
I always need the group accountability to work out as well. Lesley, how about you? Were you able to practice any kind of self-care during this time?
Well, since we're all being super honest, I would say that, part of that self-care for me was a healthy dose of those to-go drinks, right? Michael, like you have at Mad Priest. I mean,
there you go.
I will be honest. There were days because I was homeschooling 2 kids at the same time because my husband just went to work as usual every day. I mean, there were moments where in between, like United Way's work has doubled and ramped up right now, not slowed down. So that's been an added layer of stress. And, I had my 9-year-old screaming behind me, "You love your computer more than you love us." And the whole family's crying. And I just went behind the house and cried for half an hour, like those are just very real moments. The only thing I would say that we've done really well is we just started taking walks because we were homebound. And so getting out and breathing and walking a little bit just to try to break that up has been really helpful. But I'm not going to lie, it's been really challenging. We did just go on vacation though, I will say that, and got to work from a different setting, and that has kind of reset our family in a really important way. So our team is good and they can handle it. They don't need me here all the time.
Sure. I'm hoping to be able to do that soon. I totally echo everyone here. It was tough to kind of find any kind of balance. So we're nearing the end, guys. I just want to say thank you so much to Lesley and Michelle and to Michael for all of the education that you provided to all of us today, for all of your vulnerability. I think it was really informative. I was taking notes as quickly as I could. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you can feel free to reach out to Hannah or to I. We can put you in contact with everyone if you have anything that you weren't able to ask today. To close it out, I'm going to send it over to Kelly Hunt. She is our president of the executive committee for United Way Emerging Leaders. And again, thank you guys so much. And thanks to United Way for giving me the opportunity to host today. So thanks, guys.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Just to echo, Ashley, thank you, Lesley, Michael, Michelle, from the bottom of our hearts. The insight that you all provided today is truly priceless, and we know that you all are busy, and I feel so honored that you all devoted an hour to us. So thank you so much. To all of our attendees, thank you all for your time and participation. And Hannah is going to send out a follow-up email. If you're not an emerging leader and want more information, please feel free to reach out to myself or Hannah. We'd love to talk to you about that. And Hannah is also going to post a survey in the chat to get your insight on what you all want to talk about next time we're all able to meet with one another. So thank you all so much. I hope you all have a great afternoon, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.